All right, as folks trickle in, I'll make sure that they get admitted. I'll keep my eye on the lobby here. So welcome everyone. This is IMMR's webinar about survey data and Dedoose. I'm Sarah. I'm the academic director for the Institute for Mixed Methods Research, and I'm joined by Dr. Michelle Salmona, who is the president.
Hello, everybody.
Today, we're going to give you a little overview of who we are and some upcoming events and programming we have. And then we're really going to dive into the bulk of the webinar, which is going to be dedicated to the survey import feature of Dedoose. So first, I'm going to go over some Dedoose terminology, and we're going to talk about data preparation and how to get that Excel spreadsheet set up so that you can see what you want when it gets into Dedoose. And then we're going to do a live demonstration of what that survey importer can do with some demonstration data. And then we'll end with some next steps and some resources. And yes, we are recording. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. We'll stop periodically to check the chat and answer those questions. And we'll also save a little time at the end as well.
The Institute. So the Institute for Mixed Methods Research is run by academics, for academics, if you like. It has 3 foundational planks of research, professional development, and consulting. So we write books, do research, and do journal articles. You can see our publications on Google Scholar. We do a lot of capacity building work for others, so we're training people in methodology and how to do research well. And we do the consulting around that as well. So I guess the focus for the Institute is really to promote strong, rigorous, and trustworthy research. So if anybody has any questions, happy to answer them in the chat. But that's who we are.
And just to give you a sense of what we do have 2 upcoming program offerings that are going on right now. I'll throw a couple links in the chat if you're interested in those. First off, we have our virtual learning series. So this would be more of the workshop style. It's interactive. It's 3 hours split across 2 different days. So you show up, you can bring your own data, learn about Dedoose, but more importantly, learn about the theoretical foundations underpinning qualitative and mixed methods research, and then apply that to Dedoose and those skills. We also have our Bring Your Own Data research camp. So if you're in a department and you would want to fund a cohort of students to attend this camp, it's 4 weeks. The feedback has been great. Same thing if you're with a research team or a research organization and you wanted to fund your team, feel free to click on that link, or you can email me directly as well if you want more information. Alrighty. And again, go ahead and click on those links if you want more information about either of those offerings or anything else that IMMR provides. All right, I'm going to get going on Dedoose terminology here for the folks who are maybe a little more new to Dedoose, but it's also a good refresher, especially as we go into the survey importer. So with Dedoose, you have these 4 foundational elements of media, descriptors, excerpts, and codes. This is what Dedoose is using to build a web of connections in your data. So first off, we have media. This is quite simply the raw data that you upload to Dedoose. This could be your transcripts, your survey data, so that Excel spreadsheet, videos, audio, images, pretty much any data you can think of, you can get it into Dedoose. Next, we have descriptors. So this is any quantitative or categorical data that's going to be tied to those media files that you upload. So often this comes in the form of demographics, maybe survey scores, Likert scale questions, multiple choice questions, maybe a pre-post if you want to track change over time, research site, anything that you're interested in comparing or investigating in your data that's connected to those media files would work well as a descriptor.
On that point, if you're doing a qualitative study, a purely qualitative study, you may not use descriptors, or you may use a limited number of descriptors. So typically that's more for the mixed methods approach. So don't feel the need to use descriptors.
I also like using them as a project management tool. So tracking what data I have coded versus not, anything like that. Descriptors, you can use them in really creative ways. Next, we have excerpts. So this will be the smaller pieces or chunks of your data that you're flagging as significant to your study. So you can think of this as a quote that you're going to code, or maybe a snippet of a piece of a video. And of course, you would attach codes to those. So those words or phrases that you're coming up with to capture a theme or topic of interest in your study.
And you can code multiple codes to one excerpt.
And I would say, yeah, that's a best practice, really, and opens up a lot of analytical possibilities when it comes to data visualization as well. Dedoose is going to build a web of connections, and you can attach memos to nearly any item that we just went over. So you can attach a memo to a piece of media, a code, and more importantly, your excerpts. So if you want to track, your analytical thoughts, your reflexive thoughts, any notes, team communication, you can put that in a memo. And to take a step, I'll go ahead.
Just to talk about memos for a moment, this idea in Dedoose, it has a memos section where you can create memos. It's a great way to communicate in teams. You can create team communication groups. I like to think of memos in Dedoose as sort of like little yellow post-it notes. Once you start to build a memo which is more, longer, more robust, you may want to create that memo as a media file, so create it as data that you can actually code and have as part of your projects. So memos are really important. Did you want to talk about this slide about how it relates to the survey import tool, or do you want me to do that?
We both can tackle it. It might be helpful. So with the survey importer that we're going to go over today, Dedoose is going to use nearly all of these elements instantaneously once you upload that spreadsheet. So Dedoose is going to categorize all of your qualitative data as media, all of your quantitative or categorical data as descriptors, and it's also going to pre-code that qualitative data based on the question in the column title. And we're going to walk through this step by step. So you're going to have media, descriptors, excerpts, and codes right when you upload that spreadsheet. Michelle, what would you?
For me, it's helpful to visualize a spreadsheet and think of it this way. Sarah can correct me if I'm wrong, but if you think of each row in the spreadsheet would be a participant answer. So you end up with one media file for each participant containing all of their qualitative answers in one place. You end up with one code per column of data. So if it's a qualitative answer, that column qualitative question 1 would be coded, all those answers would be at one code. And any of the fields that you have in your spreadsheet that are not qualitative, so they'd be numeric or different types of variables, they would be categorized in a descriptor set based on your participant contribution. So you end up with a participant descriptor set. So every time I'm working with all of these different elements, I try and imagine where these things would sit in the Excel spreadsheet itself. So hopefully that's a bit helpful. Any questions from anybody at all before we move on? Happy to answer questions as we go. Pop them in the chat if you like. Okay, thanks.
All right, to speak a little bit about data prep before we head into Dedoose. Let Michelle take it away.
Data are the building blocks to produce evidence. That's something I wrote when I put the book together. So this is from the Dedoose textbook that we wrote. I think when everything that you're doing, it's about understanding that you're trying to visualize the connections in your data, but the data is the starting point. So online survey tools are a great way to collect data, but we're trying to work out what to do next. So here you've got, you're going to get some sort of Excel spreadsheet output from the survey tool. But what you get from the survey tool isn't probably what you're going to use. You need to do things like clean up the data. So there may be people have incorrectly entered, so some of the cells may need to be checked. So the more time you spend up front with this Excel spreadsheet before you import it into Dedoose, the better off you'll do. So for example, you may have asked people to enter their age into the spreadsheet. As a continuous, that would be what we call a continuous variable. And you might decide you'd rather change that to age range, so make it a categorical variable, which makes it easier to work with in Dedoose. You may want to look at the formatting. Some people might have lowercase, some people might have uppercase. You might want to tidy it up. You might want to just change the grouping names. You also want to look at the headings. So for example, the spreadsheet heading question, the first qualitative question might be, what did you think about this when this happened? But it's really just about understanding motivations. So you might change that column heading to understanding motivations, being aware that that column heading will become the name of the new code. So you might say question 2, understanding motivations, or something like that. So spend some time with the Excel spreadsheet, just having a look at it and tidying it up. There may be some columns that don't tie into your unit of analysis and study focus, which you might want to just obviously keep the Excel spreadsheet in its original format safely somewhere else. But the one that you're working with to prepare for import into Dedoose, you may want to delete some columns. This brings me to the discussion about units of analysis and your study focus. It's really important to understand what it is you're trying to find out before you start to work on the Excel spreadsheet, because that will inform all of the steps you take as you're preparing the data for input into Dedoose. The unit of analysis can be your participant, could be an organization, a district, a process, an intervention. It really depends on the study focus. So take some time to articulate that and be really clear what it is you're trying to find out. And this will help inform how you prepare your Excel spreadsheet. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in the example. Just getting you to do some thinking, upfront thinking, and the more that you do prior, the easier it will be when you actually move ahead to import it into Dedoose.
And I believe oh yeah, so Michelle's been talking about an Excel spreadsheet. That is the best format for using Dedoose's survey importer tool. And like we've been discussing, some columns will be dedicated to descriptors and others will be turned into codes in Dedoose. So that qualitative data, those column headers will turn into codes. So a quick tip here, usually Dedoose categorizes the qual versus quant correctly, but if you don't want to mess around or chance it, you can always put this little tag of underscore dd qual underscore in front of the qualitative question column title, and that makes it a guarantee that it will be categorized correctly. And I believe we have a snippet example here on the next slide. It's very tiny, so if you can't see it, I'll share my screen on the original document here, but you'll see we have a column called gender.
So there's a question, can you do DD quant? I'm going to say no, no need.
Yeah, no need, no need.
Get multiple questions of interest. Would it be just, you keep going, I'll answer the question.
Okay. So here we have gender, which would be one of those categorical variables, if you will. So that would be categorized as a descriptor. Same thing with eye color, age. So as Michelle was talking about, thinking through how you want to analyze your data. So this was put into ranges instead of just a continuous variable. So think through what you want out of your data. And then there's the example of what the column header looks like when it's a qualitative question and you have that DD qual tag on the front of it. And here it says, please describe your experience. But again, that would get turned into a code. So perhaps we would want to edit that to be experience with flavor if the question was asking them about what they thought.
So you change the column heading to underscore DD qual underscore experience. Then the code name in Dedoose would be experience.
Exactly.
For example.
Any questions about setting up your data? Yeah, here we go. How do you want to format multi-select question types? Yes, very good to think through this. So sometimes you would want to have perhaps a column for each potential answer and then just mark which one they answered. Can you think of another approach, Michelle? Sometimes you may have an answer if you want to categorize it as multiple answers.
It still comes back to the purpose and focus. I mean, I've done it both ways. I've had columns where I just put the multiple answers in one column with separated by a comma. That way I have multiple descriptors for each type of answer. Or I've done it with separate columns and just put in if they've actually answered that for that column. It really depends on what type of questions you're going to be asking your data. So you can do it either way. I think probably separated by comma is sufficient, but then you're going to end up with many more categories. Because you might have a category for strong, comma, robust for coffee flavor. You might have a category for robust, comma, flavorful, different things, whereas you may be better off having them separated in separate columns if that's a particular category of interest and you're going to want to drill down further. If you have a column for each answer and just indicate where people have answered for that column, it allows you to filter more effectively.
And then in terms of this example with age, Dedoose would read this as 26 through 49 is an option. So that's a distinct option. It won't read it as 26 and 49.
Yeah, that would be the name of the option list. So the option list in age for this example, for 26 to 49, 16 to 25. So you could look for younger or older people in your filtering tool.
And Michelle, do you think it's worth showing, should I share my screen on the original spreadsheet here? Or just go ahead and put this spreadsheet into Dedoose?
Well, up to the audience. I think that we've talked quite a lot about how the spreadsheet.
I think it might be worth at least taking a peek at this spreadsheet that I'm going to upload into Dedoose next. So can you all see the Excel spreadsheet now?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, great. So this was a study, a fake study about attitudes towards coffee, coffee preferences, where people were rating what coffee they enjoyed most. So our first column is always going to be an ID category of some sort. So this was participants, so we labeled this participant ID, and each row is corresponding to each individual participant. So there were 20 total. And then up top, these would be our descriptors. So all of these will turn into descriptors. These are multiple choice Likert scale questions about their routines with coffee, if they have a coffee brand preference. Bunch of different questions here. And we have gender, eye color, the age group example, and then we have our qualitative data. So asking them about their experiences with the aroma of the coffee, the taste of the coffee, and then also anything else you'd like us to know. So that's quite a long title, so I'm just going to shorten that to anything else. And again, these will turn into codes. Dedoose is going to pre-code these qualitative data for us.
I've got a question. I'm not quite sure. Should another category name title go before the numeric identifier to later link the documents?
So what's great is when you use the survey importer, Dedoose is going to link all of this for you. You don't have to worry about linking the media, quote unquote, those qualitative open-ended responses with their descriptors because Dedoose will do it for you. And that's one of the benefits and one of the greatest things about this feature. All right, I think we should hop into Dedoose and upload this. And I
Just
can
on that
even,
point, if you're having if you have existing data in there and you're bringing in a project, you'd want to have the participant identifiers to be the same as the document names. Would that be right? You'd want to have them
yeah.
named the same if you're attaching them to them. But we always recommend have a go in a separate project before you do it live in your actual project itself, just to see if it works.
Yeah, so again, if you are less familiar with Dedoose, if you just downloaded it and you're not completely oriented to these different workspaces, I'm not going to cover that today, but please attend the Getting Started with Dedoose webinar that will take you through a more foundational understanding of each part of the app. Do we have a couple questions?
Okay, so I think it's Kashonda. I'm not sure if I'm pronounced that correctly. I don't know if they can turn on their mute and ask the question, because I guess I'm not understanding the question that's being asked. Something about if I
Gotcha.
have
Yeah.
survey data and other qual data like lesson plans.
Right. So if you have other qualitative data you're going to upload that you then want to link to the survey data that you uploaded, you can either do that manually, excuse me, or yes, you can have it be the titles be exactly the same to use the auto link feature. And the Deduce YouTube page has a 2-minute video where their COO, Jose, he's great, walks through those actual steps. So we can point you to
Good
that video.
question in the chat saying if something goes wrong, if there's something's wrong with the import, is it better to fix it in Excel and re-import? Usually, yeah. It depends if it's usually depends on the issue, but I would usually do a practice run. If it didn't look right, go back to the original spreadsheet, do it again, and see how it looked. And so before I brought it into the live project.
And Lauren, yeah, I'm with you. It used to make me nervous as well, but then I started using this survey import and the auto link feature and saved me a lot of headaches. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the import data button here, and then Deduce is going to ask you what type of data do you want to import. Today we're going to do a spreadsheet, and we're going to import that spreadsheet I just showed you about coffee. The window that you see behind us here is basically all the information we just told you, but it is worth a quick read because it's going to reinforce some best practices. And then it's telling us here the import was successful with no errors. Sometimes you'll get an alert that there was an error. And again, that's just alerting you to go back to your spreadsheet and make sure that there's no hidden formatting or characters in there.
Typically what I found when I bring in a survey import through the import tool is I might find that I end up with more descriptors than I expected because there was a typographical error in the spreadsheet somewhere. That's something I definitely would go back to the Excel spreadsheet and fix for consistency. But you know, you'll see as you bring it in if it looks right.
Mm-hmm. And then, so for one project that uses survey and interview data, should we upload both of those things into the media section under one project or upload into Deduce? So I would recommend always testing your survey import in a brand new project like we're going to do right now so that you can assess if you need to go back to your Excel spreadsheet and change something. But otherwise, the power of Deduce are those mixed methods capabilities. So I would recommend keeping your pure qual data and your interview or your, survey data in one project. There we go. Michelle said it way better than I did. Always one research equals one Deduce project. Thank you. Okay, so I just uploaded that spreadsheet. So let's take a tour of what Deduce did here. So you'll see we have some codes. So again, Deduce pre-coded each of those open-ended responses. So we have the anything else you'd like us to know, the aroma experience, and the taste experience.
You can see that the code for that first code name is really too long. So that's an indication of how you would change that. Just the project, the column name in the Excel spreadsheet needs to be named something relevant but shorter to make it easier to work with in Dedoose.
Exactly. And we can also see that information in our codes workspace. If we go to our media workspace, again, this is going to house every single participant's qualitative answers. So if you wanted to code all of participant one's open-ended questions, you could come here and click on that document.
If you go back to the list of media, you can see that it brings up something around naming conventions. So, for instance, it's a good practice really to, instead of calling it participant 1, you might want to call it participant 001. Come up, names that help you sort, and just be aware of the naming convention as you create those identities.
And then in our excerpts workspace, again, you're going to have every single excerpt in your project, and this is everything that Dedoose has pre-coded for you.
And you can see the attached descriptors there listed as well.
In our descriptors workspace, we have all of that descriptor data, and you can see that it's linked to the participant. So you can kind of think of these as a participant profile with all the data related to that participant there for you. Right when I upload a survey, my first thing I do is go to the descriptors workspace and check all of these categories here to make sure that they're correct. If you are wanting to run any quantitative analysis on any of these descriptors, you would need to make sure it was listed as a number under the type instead of an option list. But usually an option list will be the best option, for lack of a better word. But if you want to run quant analysis, make sure that that's a number.
The difference between a continuous and a categorical variable.
And if you wanted to edit these in any way you can just double click.
So we're getting a couple of questions here. With pseudonyms, you can choose how you have the individual unique identifiers. It doesn't have to be a number. Would you agree with that, Sarah?
Absolutely.
You can choose to use pseudonyms rather than numbers. Yeah.
And then Deborah has a project with interviews and field notes. Want to add
this is about linking them to the descriptors. So the unique identifier at the first column of your spreadsheet would need to work with the identifiers of your participants.
And Deborah, I would also ask how many participants you have, because manually linking is pretty quick, as long as I would say you have under 50 participants, but anything over that, then it's worth investigating if you can auto link. And can Dedoose automatically
practice in a different project first.
Can Dedoose automatically recode the option list data into numeric data? Yes. You would just hit change right here, and then you would choose number. But that doesn't make sense in this example, so I'm going to hit cancel. The purpose of linking is to make sure you can, for instance, track any of the concepts you've coded with a participant and put them in relation to any of their descriptor data. So for instance, if I wanted to know how women felt about a certain coffee, descriptors would allow me to track that very easily.
So in this case, think of the participant as a unit of analysis. So we're investigating what different people think about coffee in this particular project. So the idea about having descriptors is you have ways of describing your participants, and you want to be able to link all of their data, anything that participant has said or shared with you, to those set of descriptors. It then allows you to drill into different ways of filtering your data. That's why you need to have everything linked. You're building a web of connections. That's the strength of using an application like Dedoose.
You can see this is basically replicating your Excel spreadsheet exactly, except it's taking that qualitative data out of it and putting it in the media workspace so that you can code it yourself. But if you ever needed to come in here and edit one of your participants' descriptors, you can do so by double clicking, and you'll see all their descriptor data, and then also any qualitative data that person, aka descriptor profile, is linked to. And Deborah, we can link you up with the video on YouTube that goes through that process step by step. All right, so one of the great things about this descriptor linking is that you can do some preliminary analysis right when you upload because you have all of your descriptor data in here. So I quickly just want to go over a couple charts to make that point. If you go to your descriptor charts area in the Analyze tab and you select descriptor ratios multi-chart, you'll see that all of that descriptor data is represented in a pie chart for us. I'm going to switch it to a bar graph because that's my preference. It's easier for me to
Oh, I love
understand.
the pie chart. I love the pie charts.
I find it hard. Maybe it's because I'm twisting my head or something.
Yeah,
But
okay.
here, for instance, this question of I drink coffee daily, you can get a breakdown very quickly and see the overview
So do you want
of
to
what
just click on
participants are
strongly
saying.
agree and show that it's the live data? This, it brings up the excerpts connected with that. So
Yeah, so
already straight away you can filter by that.
yeah, you can make a mini data set within your project. You can even code these excerpts directly from this workspace and cycle through. So again, this would be coding every open-ended question from folks who said strongly agree to they drink coffee daily. And you can cycle through. And that's the same for any chart in Dedoose. It's all dynamic and live. So anything you click on, it's going to pull up the qualitative data behind it.
So by using the survey import tool, we're already able to filter our data without having done any coding straight away. We can already start to just look at, say, what do people who drink younger women who drink coffee every day, what are they saying? And we can do that straight away and then we can code that data or just simply filter it.
And yes, this is only the data for descriptors because we haven't coded anything yet, but Dedoose has pre-coded the questions.
So these are the descriptors that are populated from your online survey export.
And just to make that point that Michelle was going over, I moved over to the descriptor times descriptor field. So let's say I wanted gender here and I wanted to know if there was a gender difference or just interrogate this question more of I drink coffee daily and then break it up by gender. So women, 5 women strongly agreed that they drink coffee daily.
So if you have a huge online survey, before you're even doing any coding, you can already drill down through these filtering tools to subsets of data that you might want to work with first, which is kind of cool.
And then once you start doing coding the qualitative data, these charts become much more layered and dynamic. Any questions about some of these analysis charts? Yeah, so you bring up a good point. So there are some,
You suggest
I want to say that
items.
they're more than, they're not basic calculations. They're more intermediate, I guess. So Dedoose can do ANOVA, t-test, chi-square, correlation.
Very basic stats, yeah.
Yeah. And if you're curious about what any of those mean, you can always click the little quotation, or excuse me, question mark, and it will take you to an explanation.
So there's a question from Carrie I don't quite understand. Do you suggest that we link to multiple items? Yeah, Dedoose is very good at building those connections between multiple items in the project. What we've got here is just how the linking's set up before we've done anything to it. So this is just from the survey import tool. I'm not quite sure if that answers her question, but perhaps we can have a follow-up.
Yeah, and Carrie, we can follow up too. You would only want to link things that made sense. So if I had data related to participant 1 that I wanted to make sure stuck with participant 1's descriptor profile, then I would want to link those together. Otherwise, if you link things together that don't make sense, then that would make your project convoluted and not helpful. All right, so when it comes to coding, you have many different options to approach coding. So Dedoose has pre-coded the questions for you. So if you wanted to code by question, you could easily do so by hovering over that code, clicking the little quotation mark. And again, that's going to pull up all excerpts related to, well, this question is kind of boring. Anything else you'd like us to know? Let's go aroma experience. And so again, this is everything folks said about their aroma experience. And I can code directly from this workspace. So if I wanted to create a code called
Flavorful.
flavorful, okay.
A great word.
I'm not as creative today. You should always include a description.
Absolutely, without a doubt. Your code book must be complete at all times.
Yes. Flavorful.
And your description must be written in a way that's accessible to others.
You can include a custom color if you wanted, and also you can weight codes. Not going to go over that today, but if you're interested, feel free to email me and we can hook you up with some resources. So now we have that code in our code book, and I can apply it to this excerpt and then just cycle to the next one. So that's, again, really great if you want to code by question and you don't want to be distracted by other things or other data in your survey. But you can also code by participant. So if you wanted to go to your media workspace and code by participant, you can click into that document. And again, you're going to see these highlights because Dedoose pre-coded it for you based on question. I've grown to appreciate that, and I just code on top of it. Or you can select the little bar to the left to bring up the current excerpt and then add your codes to it. If you're annoyed by these highlights, you can delete them, and I can send you a video to do that. But again, I would say they're pretty helpful, and you can always ignore them or filter them out of your project if they're getting in the way of any of your analysis. I'm going to pause for
any codes that you
questions.
Are created at the root level. So managing the code tree, you would go to the code workspace to do that. When you've done some coding, you'd want to spend some time reflecting on your code tree. And so you made the descriptors your questions. No, that's subject. Do you understand that one, Sarah? So you made the descriptors your questions?
Oh, I think I understand. So that column in the spreadsheet, the column title header for any open-ended / qualitative question will end up being a code instead of a descriptor. So any qualitative data in that survey is going to be put in your media workspace and then pre-coded by question, aka by the Excel column title header.
So it allows you to look at your data by question. So you can look at it by question. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you have different choices about the way you code your data. If you go to the media tab, you can see all of the answers given by each individual participant. So you can code by participant, do it one by one, look at all their answers in one place. Or if you go to the code workspace, you can see where all the qualitative questions have been put together in one space. What's another question? Follow the linking question. Complicated question. Do you want to carry on, or we're getting some quite complicated questions? Can people unmute themselves and talk to us about these things, or?
I don't think so in the webinar format. So bear with us as we read through these. So Lauren, just to clarify, the survey importer is the way to get your Excel spreadsheet data into Dedoose, right? There is, for example, no copy and paste option. So for a spreadsheet, you're correct. The best way to get spreadsheet data into Dedoose is by going to the home page, hitting import data, and choosing spreadsheet.
A grade of student in the student survey and a grade of students in parent survey. That's a very complicated question, Carrie. I'm not quite sure I understand it. Perhaps when we finish up, you can stay after we finish and we can talk to you about it then.
Yeah, and Carrie and I have worked together a bit before, so I think I know where you're heading, Carrie, and we can set up a time to talk. Carrie has a massive project on her hands. I will say, Lauren, that if you have any qualitative data, you can also choose to upload that by copying and pasting it into Dedoose by hitting create a blank document or import text. But it's really nice to keep it all together because Dedoose creates those descriptors for you and links them automatically.
So Lauren's saying she's thinking of alternative for undergrads. I guess it always depends on what you're trying to do. So how, if it's just you want them to work with data, then maybe rather than having an Excel spreadsheet, get them to copy and paste it into a Word document.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you want them to learn how to code, that would be a great option. Any other questions we can answer in terms of preparing your spreadsheet and getting it set up in Dedoose, assessing the import quality? And again, if you're wanting more of a tutorial about how to go about coding, I can send you a link to a past webinar we did called Getting Started with Dedoose, or you can attend the next live webinar of Getting Started with Dedoose. So when you go to the home screen, this is just going to give you another preview of that descriptor ratios multi-chart we were on earlier via the Analyze tab. So again, really great if you want to isolate certain subsets of your sample and look at the qualitative data behind that. And any of these charts can also be exported. One thing I wanted to make note of here, let's say you did not like how these were ordered. Strongly agree, neutral, strongly disagree. It doesn't make much logical sense. You can change the order by going back to your descriptors workspace, choosing the descriptor of your choice, and then you can reorder these. So if you wanted strongly disagree all the way to the bottom, neutral in the middle, and strongly agree up top, you can make sure that those are ordered correctly and then hit submit. Yes, you can conduct ANOVA. Dedoose will let you know if you don't have enough data to calculate an ANOVA, or if you don't have a correct, would it be a categorical variable to compare groups. So if you ever get a message from Dedoose saying it cannot perform that calculation, go back to your descriptors workspace and make sure that these are categorized correctly in terms of what type it is. So if you're doing a calculation where it needs to be a number, make sure it's listed as a number. If you have gender listed as a number, you would want to change that to an option list, and then that ANOVA will work for you.
Oh, the official Dedoose textbook.
Written by the Michelle Salmona.
That's so sweet. The way we put the textbook together is to give you a sort of a way into actually doing some research as well. So the chapters are basically set up with some discussion around theory at the beginning, then some to-do steps in the middle, and then a real world case study at the end. So actually trying to give you some practical tips about how to work with Dedoose. You may find it helpful. What Dedoose say is if you do buy the book and you email support at Dedoose with proof of purchase, they'll give you an extra 2 months of Dedoose access for free. Is in that book. Certainly not in the detail that we covered today.
But there are case study examples of larger mixed method studies. Yeah.
So it's not really at that level of detail of the survey import tool, particularly like we covered today, wouldn't be in the book. The book's more conceptual in its approach to doing research. And then the other thing, there we go.
Oh, Janelle, you're
Oh,
coming in
thank
with
you.
a testimonial.
Oh, sweet, thank you.
Just
Glad
know
you
that
liked it.
we are experts in Dedoose as well as methodologists. So if you're looking for more methodological support or other research services, feel free to head to our website, or you can always email us at contact@immrglobal.org. And I would recommend checking out the Deduce support YouTube page. They upload videos all the time and they're getting more and more useful by the day. There is a video on there about the survey importer and the auto link function. I know we had some questions about that. So that's a great resource, as well as the Deduce user guide that is free on their website.
And I believe Dedoose are in the process of putting together a new interactive learning center, which hopefully should go live sometime this year, where you'll be able to search for resources in a sensible way to actually find existing resources in a particular area. So there'll be a place to go for the survey import tool. At the moment, you can go to the user guide and look for the survey import tool, and it'll give you step-by-step instructions. But hopefully the learning center, when they launch it, will have all resources together in one space. So YouTube videos, the user guide itself, and different resources available.
And I'm throwing my direct email in the chat in case y'all have questions or want the recording or slides from today. I'm happy to send them to you. Otherwise, we're going to stick around for the last 5 to 8 minutes here and answer questions. If you have no questions, it was great to get to talk to you about the survey import tool for a little bit. And we hope to see you in the virtual learning series for 4 separate dates for those learning series. And that will be much more in-depth. And we collaborated with Christina Silver with that learning series, and she's great.